And welcome to the Metaphysical Podcast. Celestial weapons that could grant the beholder godlike knowledge and power aren't necessarily just myths. They've been documented throughout history. The Emerald Tablets are maybe the most widely discussed relics because their mysteries are fascinating. But before diving into that multifaceted tale, we wanted to go deeper to find accounts of other ancient tablets that nobody seems to be talking about, because that's what we do here on Metaphysical. From mysterious finds in the Grand Canyon to curses from Israel, from the heart of Harlem, New York to the Holy Grail, the stories we found are going to blow your mind. If you want to hear what we found, join remote viewer John Vivanco and me, investigative researcher Rob Counts, for a show that's out of this world.
And are you listening to the Metaphysical Podcast or watching us on video platform? If you are, please leave us a 5-star rating and review to help us reach even more people. It really, really helps. Make sure you also like and subscribe wherever you're listening. What's up, Rob?
John, how are you?
Good.
Not all these tablets seem to be legit, but we did find a bunch of them.
Well, I mean, the tablet thing is really weird, actually. In the remote viewing side, like you'll probably be shocked as to what people believe versus what we get in remote viewing.
Yeah, and what I think is so strange is this idea of unearthing something from a previous age, but it'd almost be like finding a piece of paper written by a random person in a library, and you're just gonna like believe whatever it says. Like,
right?
You get what I mean? Like, there's that element to it. I think we got to get into the Grand Canyon tablet. Well, we talked about the Grand Canyon in one of our last episodes, and there's a little bit of a story here, and I kind of want to get your feedback on whether or not you even think this thing is legit. So in 1909, the Arizona Gazette reported that the Smithsonian archaeologists, they discovered an ancient civilization deep inside a vast Grand Canyon cavern. We talked about this, complete with mummies, Egyptian-style artifacts, etc. The 1909 article, it basically explains that explorations in the Grand Canyon, mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light. Remarkable find indicates ancient people migrated from the Orient. So that was part of the title of this article, right? And so, among the mix, it's reported on some of these blogs that a tablet was found in one of these caverns. So here's a quote, actually. If their theories are borne out by the translation of the tablets engraved with hieroglyphics, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were and whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which staggers the wildest fancy of the fictionist. That is sort of what makes this compelling.
It is. I mean, we'd seen that Kincaid did find what he claimed to have found. I mean, he did find that. There were, according to our data, Egyptians in the Grand Canyon. So I would not be surprised that there'd be tablets, because that was their method of recording in general. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Now, whether these pictures on the internet are true or not of these tablets, I highly doubt it.
Yeah, we have a picture of this tablet, don't we, Lindsay, that was found in one of these places? To me, this looks like some knucklehead casually created this.
Right.
I'm not getting ancient vibes off of this. I'm getting
it's something new, something somebody just made. It's kind of like Gosford glyphs. On one side, you have those that are clearly like sharp and fake.
Right.
The other side, you have stuff that's really worn, and they both look Egyptian. So yeah, it's just a little too obvious.
I agree. Yeah, but
Kincaid, he found what he found, what he claimed to have found. I mean, I know that. We saw that with RV. So
right, and what's funny about this particular tablet that we're looking at is people might look at this and then completely discount Kincaid's find or what's actually going on in the Grand Canyon, but you have to ask yourself a question. If the Grand Canyon find was fake, why is that part of the Grand Canyon completely sealed off and secured?
And why are the hills, mountains, canyons around there named after Egyptian
or Buddhist
deities or Buddhist, right?
Yeah. And it is claimed that they reportedly found a Buddha statue in one of these caverns as well.
Right. That's one of the claims too. Yeah.
Right. Which is also fascinating. Like, what culture isn't there? Ancient culture, right?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. And I think that they went all the way up into Utah at the very least. Because you do find hieroglyphs that look Egyptian in Utah, like up into like the Uinta Mountains and areas over there.
So fascinating.
Yeah, John Wesley Powell, right? So he was the director of USGS, and then he was the first director of the Bureau of Ethnology for the Smithsonian Institution. And he was the one that basically shut down with his Powell doctrine that people could not research or go after stuff that appeared to be older than when Columbus discovered America. And that became the decree, right?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, right. It's ridiculous. So he was like one of the first white men supposedly down the Grand Canyon. Went on a massive trip down the river rafting trip down the Grand Canyon. And in his book of that journey, there are some people who put quotes on the internet saying that John Wesley Powell, we talked about this in our strange and anomalous experiences of mystery spots in America, right? Last episode. But I couldn't find that statement that he made where they claim he found Egyptian artifacts. I could not find that statement in his book because I got the old original printing. So I don't, the internet's just a funny place. People really just stretch it there in general. And you can't take anything at face value on the internet. Pictures, statements, you just can't do it.
Honestly, it's kind of like, I hate to say it, as interested as I am in it, it's also the same case with unearthing old, tablets for real. Like, we don't know. We just don't know. And that's why I think this show is so interesting, is because we can actually get to the bottom of some of this stuff.
Right.
And we will.
Or have a direction at the very least. I mean,
at least. Right. And, okay. So the Grand Canyon stuff, we've kind of gone over that in a previous episode, but this was really fascinating. There is, allegedly a cursed tablet found in Israel. And what makes this find so fascinating isn't just that it's an unearthed tablet, because there could be many of those, but it may be the first documented, I guess, tablet or reference to Yahweh. So it was found dates between 1200 and 1400 BC. Of course, who knows whether or not that time is accurate, right? But it has the Hebrew word for God, Yah, like YHWH, in the possibly earliest appearance ever found. And it was found on Mount Ebal, I guess it's called. And it was written with a curse inside. So in the Bible, Mount Ebal is associated with curses, actually. So this could also, could come with something evil attached to it.
Well, I mean, what Yahweh from the earlier sects of very, very early sects in Christianity, and even beforehand, was a volcano god, right? Lived in a volcano. So I'm guessing Ebal was a volcano, right?
Well, and we don't know. I mean,
we don't know.
Like the YHWH could have just been a word for any kind of deity that anyone was.
It could be, right?
Could be. We don't know.
Right.
But it's because it goes back so long, right? But one of the more interesting things too is, if this dating is correct, this might actually prove that the Israelites were literate when they entered the Holy Land and able to document biblical events as they happened, which is not really the common idea,
Right. Well, I mean, when you get to Göbekli Tepe, that's currently breaking the mainstream worldview of time and archaeology at the moment. And once that gets accepted into modern archaeology as being that old, because it was the Clovis people that is the claim. They were nomads in that time period. They weren't building culture, language, structures. But now you have this dated to at least 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe, and nobody can conceive of these people having built something like that because there's an assumption they didn't do it. So,
well, it's sort of like, it is that why these modern archaeologists are so kind of unwilling to really get in there and talk about it.
That is why.
Because if you do start talking about Göbekli Tepe, you have to acknowledge that there are things there that are built that completely blow our current narrative out of the water. Like, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it's such a fascinating site. I mean, such a fascinating site, and this is breaking it right now. But I don't know. I mean, I had heard other archaeologists state about things like this, that they would never go along with it, even if it were true, because it would break a paradigm. It would break a worldview. I mean,
and look at that.
Yeah.
Look at how exact that is. You get the feeling from that. These were not schleps that put this together.
No, they weren't.
This is this is serious.
There's actually, I don't know, I think Lindsay probably brought this up, sent an article to me or you or whatever, where it was actually on Forbes.com, and it actually came from 2017, where there are scientists, archaeologists, who believe that the inscriptions at Göbekli Tepe are documenting a comet impact, right? So that's fascinating, but I haven't heard that pushed around very much, except, for Graham Hancock and on the fringes of mainstream. But I'll tell you, that's exactly what we get when we remote view those. We get that the civilization knew that there was some major planetary impact coming. So they started to warn others. They started to go underground. So if you get into Derinkuyu in Turkey as well, Derinkuyu is like this, I don't know how big it is, but it's just massive amounts of tunnels underground that were built around that time to house 20,000 people, as well as cattle. And that was also, when we remote view that, it was to move away from this event, to hide underground so they wouldn't die in this big catastrophic event that was coming.
What's strange about that too is, like, and of course this is a bit of a wild idea, but what if the Ark wasn't a boat or a ship? What if it was an underground cavern that everything went under and it was able to stay away from the flood?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Could be. Absolutely could be.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, Göbekli Tepe, I think that's what it's saying there ultimately. I think those archaeologists are correct.
What's really interesting too about, like, all this stuff that's come out, Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix, Graham Hancock's claims, they are so reasonable. They're very, very reasonable claims about mysteries that could certainly be true. And the way that he is personally attacked for even claiming it is just so silly to me. And the archaeologists are open about rejecting these ideas because it will change the paradigm. So how are we to trust the narratives that our archaeologists are telling us when they're telling us that they're purposely not going to be honest about what they're finding here?
Right, exactly.
That's a shame.
The amount of research funding that they get by sticking to the narrative is a lot more that they're going to get if they don't. And people focus on feeding their mouth, making a family. I mean, and so that's where they're coming from ultimately, because they're in self-preservation mode.
And I really enjoy listening to academics speak about things and just their way of describing everything and using evidence to come to conclusions on things. The problem with the academics are that they are judging everything based off of the current widely accepted evidence that everyone else can see, and the things that actually were found that could have made a difference have been swept under the rug because a lot of these archaeologists are unwilling to put these things forward to change the narrative.
Yeah.
It's the human problem with all of this stuff,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's ever gonna change. I really don't. I don't see this thing changing. This has been going on for
hundreds of
thousands
years.
and thousands,
thousands
of years.
Actually, you're right.
I mean,
who knows what the Egyptians were telling to their people about the pyramids that like that they found, that they stumbled upon in Egypt, right? It's silly. So, we were just talking about Göbekli Tepe, and there was an ancient stone tablet, found in that area, right? So, ancient stone tablet reveals ancient cataclysm. We were just talking about this.
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yep. That's that. I thought that was a fascinating article because it lines up with our remote viewing data. That they were literally like trying to escape this. This was like the place for people to go in order to escape this. Like it was almost like instructional on where you're going to go, on how to get out of this cataclysm, So yeah, such an amazing site. It's a warning.
Yeah, and just a little bit more information on it. It confirms that a comet struck the Earth around 12,000 or 11,000 BC, leading to global destruction, the extinction of the woolly mammoth, and the rise of new civilizations. Skeptics, this is where it's, kind of start to roll your eyes here, but skeptics say that no physical impact site has been found to prove that a comet hit the Earth and caused massive destruction. Well, I mean, if it hit the ocean, you're not necessarily going to see an impact.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, that just basically shuts down. Right?
Yeah.
It shuts it down. So you can't talk about it anymore until they find that site. And, I mean, come on.
But there, there's just like so many different places to pull from. I mean, Plato basically says that the advanced kingdom of Atlantis sank around 9600 BC. I mean, it could be the same event.
Possibly. Yeah, who knows? I think was that 9600? I thought it was around. I'm not sure. Was it 9600 from 9600 years
BC
from his point in time?
I'm not
was
sure.
It like, yeah,
I think they're estimating like 9600 was the BC was the year.
But whatever the case, I mean, there is proof that sea levels did rise because the ice sheets melted around 11,000 years ago. And they actually, that's the Younger Dryas. And they went through a couple of those iterations until we get into our modern times. So the ocean, I think it was, what was it? 400 feet lower at that point in time. Yeah. So there were civilizations, and where do people live? They live on the coast, right? So there were civilizations in coastal areas, and there were islands in the
totally
oceans.
Eaten up. Yeah.
So I mean, that is a known. And then the ice sheets melted, and then of course there was an Atlantis. Of course, we can call it whatever we want. We can call it Timbuktu. We can call it whatever. It doesn't matter what the name of it is. There were many ancient islands and civilizations on those islands.
I'll subscribe to Timbuktu.
Timbuktu. Yeah.
Well, and also just something to to make clear, whenever time is brought up, like when it was, I never necessarily just believe that right away, just because if you do, you're nailing yourself down to it's a theory.
Yeah.
Even with carbon dating is not necessarily accurate, and we don't know where this research is coming from, what other research has been swept under the rug. It's a slippery slope, this stuff. Yeah.
Agreed.
Coming into some more modern stuff, this is actually pretty interesting. in 1902, I guess, so mysterious ruins unearthed in Harlem, a strange tablet was found amid broken pillars when they were digging the subway. And what's interesting too is, well, okay, I'll get into it. I'll kind of get into this. So workmen digging on a tunnel unearthed large fragments of enormous stone pillars that appeared to form part of an extensive ruin in a part of Manhattan Island where no building is known to have existed. At the same time, they uncovered a mysterious stone slab bearing part of an inscription, puzzling many antiquarians. The lettering on the slab, together with what remains of the date, seemed to indicate, according to one scholar who investigated it, that it commemorated in some way the foundation of the United States government in 1789. And you can see inscribed on there PGW. So the PGW, which are still legible on the slabs, they're supposed to stand for the initials of President George Washington.
Huh.
Yeah, and the missing figure in the date is regarded as an 8, making the year 1789, the year when Washington was sworn in as president of the newly formed government. So, maybe this doesn't sound that interesting to you. I'm not sure, how many times you watched Nicolas Cage on whatever movie that was. What was that? Lindsay? You'll remember.
What is
that
this
movie.
like?
National Treasure.
National Treasure. Thank you. So the mystery is why it was dumped there in the rubble of a building pretty unceremoniously, right? So why is there no record of a building ever having stood anywhere near there? Some speculate it could have been a tombstone or a part of a monument, but there's no graveyard or cemetery in that area of the city. So only marble pillars of a building were located there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea about that one. No idea. I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
It's like, I don't know, maybe they were guide stones, like the Georgia guide stones for that era. Who knows? Somebody trying to reshape history.
Yeah, and I mean, who's to say it's not a bunch of drunk New Yorkers?
Maybe there were more. I mean, it seems like there would be more. That's what I'm thinking. But
it could have been anyone that chiseled President George Washington into that. We don't know.
And what does it mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
More. I mean, these like inscribed pillars are interesting because the Georgia guidestones were such a weird, bizarre thing.
Super weird.
That it was like, I mean, we know that those are modern, obviously modern. And they had to do, they're gone now. Somebody blew them up.
They were blown up.
They were blown up because they have to do with the New World Order situation, And to me, it's like, these stone monuments are like weird because you can, at least back then, a long, long time ago, you could shape culture with what was inscribed on these monuments, So I think the Georgia guidestones were intended to shape culture to a degree, at least the conspiratorial side. It's just so weird. Right? Well, you get into Denver airport. I mean, like we got the murals in the Denver airport, and you're like, well, heck, that's shaping the conspiracy side of culture as well. It's like just playing with people.
And that's a perfect example of, let's say there was a cataclysm and these go under the ocean for thousands of years and someone digs them up and there's no way for them to know that some like rich Mason guy had these made and put up in this site, in the middle of the night when no one could see it. Like they just appeared one morning. No one knows that, you know, like you can't even find that back then, but then they're like, oh, we unearthed these. Look,
I know. It's amazing. This is how they were. This is who they were.
Right. It's like there's a lot that we can tell from this civilization from these. Meanwhile, it's like, there's people like listening to hip hop down the road and like, has nothing to do with anything that was going on at the time.
And you got to get a bunch of remote viewers to remote view it in order to like figure out how much time you wasted on it.
Right. And then if you're trying to gauge something from a translate, it's translated into a few different languages over there, right? Like the major languages, even the translations of these languages or how these languages change in the future or what's around is a complete mystery. So then you're getting into the translation part of the whole thing. And it's like people will like dig into a certain word that they think means something mystical or magical, and it really was just the word for like a necklace or whatever. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
Well, we've got some more interesting ones here, though. So okay, everybody's interested in some Indiana Jones stuff. The 10 Commandments actually are considered, 2 tablets that the Ark of the Covenant, basically contains these tablets, right? Or yeah, so they're inside the Ark, and the Word of God is reported to be written on them. Here's who's that? Charleston Heston or whatever his name is, as Moses. Yeah, we're showing a picture of that for y'all on the podcast right now. But okay, so the 10 Commandments were written on these, and they were housed in the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant is speculated to be located in many places: Ethiopia, Israel, ancient. I mean, basically, was lost in ancient Babylon, right? So could have been hidden somewhere by the Nazis. We did we did a very thorough series on this on Rise.tv called The Relics of Power, where we go into Hitler's mad pursuit for relics that could give him the power to bring in his Third Reich. And the Ark of the Covenant mystery goes deep. It's a very interesting one. We'll get into this in a little bit, but the Ark of the Covenant was said to have similar powers to the Spear of Destiny in a way, where if you had possession of the Ark, you would be victorious in battle. And right. This is why Hitler was looking for these relics, as he believed the person who was in ownership of these would give him power to do great things.
Yeah, we talked about the Ark of the Covenant before, didn't we? Yeah, we did.
A little bit, yep.
That was that whole thing, because we were looking at one thing that remote viewers task each other on is the Ark of the Covenant. Like, it gets tasked over and over and over again. And it's been like that since, remote viewing was declassified. And for the longest time, I got to say that the Ark was sort of in this dusty, cave-ish like area. And there was sort of it was always like remote viewers would encounter this paraphysical being when they would go remote view the Ark. And it was like the being was guarding it, in a sense. It's like there was some like great-ish, powerful-ish being that was around it, right? I mean,
like the man in the black hat kind of thing, or
no, it was good.
Oh.
It wasn't evil or bad or whatever. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like this presence. Like, people would always draw big eyes, just like these big eyes watching you as you were remote viewing it, and they get this sense that they're being watched here. So we view this stuff a lot. So I had a friend who moved to Israel, and he got with some other people, and they were searching for the Ark of the Covenant. And he was like, I think we may have found the location where it is. And can you remote view where it currently is and see if that lines up with what we've got? So, we remote view it, and all of a sudden, all the data is different from the past. It's literally like in control of military. Like, literally in control of military.
You mean
like,
military's in control of it?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Military is in control of it. All this stuff around it, all these vehicles, very authoritarian official people all around it, and being hidden away. And I told him, and like, it's not like that anymore. It seems to have been found, right? He didn't believe me. He didn't believe me. And why ask me to do it if he wanted it to be something else? But I thought that was very strange. Very weird.
Well, and he could have been right. He could have been right at a certain time. It was where
he probably was
tracked it down, and then it got moved again, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what's weird about the Ark of the Covenant is the story that they told in Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark is very accurate.
Yeah.
That it is said that if the Ark is opened and you're not worthy and you look at the word of God, that you basically exactly what it said, that you'll basically fry to death.
Right. And there is something absolutely paraphysical about this. Like, it's not just sort of like an advanced technology. There's something spiritual, paraphysical, paranormal about it on top of all that. So I don't know. It's a very, very strange thing. Very strange thing.
It is. And the history is very strange, how far it goes back. The fact that I think it was Solomon that had it for a time. And this, of course, like these stories, I think get made up to some extent, but it would be interesting. There is the Rock of Destiny, I think it's called. That is the stone in which the king or the queen of England gets, what is it when they're brought in as king? They get kind of blessed on, right? And the stone.
What's it called?
What's it called?
It's their coronation stone. The stone
coronation.
Of destiny.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the coronation stone. It's said to be, basically it's from Scotland, and this is the stone that all the kings were always
right. That thing. Yeah.
Yes, and so every time a new king or queen is what's the word I'm looking for here? It's killing me. Coronated. Thank you. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word, but every time they're coronated, it's on the stone. So they're bringing the stone in from Scotland. They're coronating on the stone, and this stone is said to have housed the Ark of the Covenant, and you can see the outline of the Ark on that, right?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. There was a time too when it was thought that it was in the Lalibela, Africa churches as well. In fact, there's a church, they make the most amazing churches, Lalibela, Africa, where there's one that's cut literally, okay, so the ground's flat and they cut it down into the ground and built a church underground. And it was said that, I don't know if it was in that one, I think it moved throughout the churches there, but it was supposedly in some of those churches in Lalibela, Africa.
Is that Northern Africa?
I'm not 100% sure which part
of
Africa.
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia. There you go. Dang. So that's literally cut straight out of the rock. And they still claim today that it exists in one of the churches there. But, we had been on the path of trying to figure out where it was, and it's not in those churches anymore. But I'm guessing it probably was. Those churches are epic. That's definitely a bucket list place for me.
Absolutely. Look at that.
Look at that. Incredible.
It is. Beautiful. That's so cool. It's like, yeah, that is, I always think that the sort of carving and mining out of rock is like such an interesting art.
I mean, look at this. Like they had to
relief.
Cut it down, right?
You can't make a mistake, man.
No, you can't.
How do you fix a mistake? You can't. It's like it's either perfect or it's not. And it's like,
yeah, it's incredible.
Reminds me, I know this sounds weird, right? But it's like, it kind of reminds me. So I painted a lot in the past. I think you have too. Obviously it's like really, any kind of relief or sculpture. But when I look at that, it reminds me of watercolor, because watercolor, you have to like reverse engineer your whites,
right?
And you can't, it's like, it's very different from oil painting, where you can kind of like, you just build it up. Here, it's like what you don't paint is what's so important. Right. And it just reminds me of that for some reason.
Negative space.
Yeah. So so I guess like the guardian of the church in that church we were just looking at, the guardian of the church is still the only one allowed to look at whatever ark is inside in Ethiopia. Oh, well, not that church particularly. Sorry. The one where they say the ark is, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got also and this is kind of along the same lines, is this Holy Grail tablet. Now the Holy Grail tablet, so the Holy Chalice was only one Holy Grail, according to the SS officer Otto Rahn. Because, again, Hitler was looking for all of this stuff back in the day, right? So the other was a stone tablet inscribed with runes written by ancient German supermen, this Aryan thing, who attained the ultimate knowledge of the law of life.
That's funny.
This was funny.
I mean,
yeah.
What was the Admiral Byrd's diary? You remember Admiral Byrd's diary, that whole thing? And it supposedly came from this guy in the 1970s. It was leaked or something like that. And it basically had Admiral Byrd going to the center of the earth and meeting with these super Aryans.
Right.
And they had flying saucers with Nazi symbols on them. And so we remote viewed that. People are always talking about this whole Admiral Byrd thing. So we remote viewed that, and it was just propaganda. It was like modern propaganda of somebody who loved the Nazis that created this thing that, hey, Admiral Byrd did go here and met with super Nazis who live in the middle of the earth. It was literally just a made up story because somebody loved the Nazis. Really.
I'm all about cool stories and mysteries and stuff, but
much stuff is nonsense.
Yeah, human beings really can muck stuff up, can't they?
Yeah, so much stuff is nonsense. And people talk about the Admiral Byrd diaries as if they are a real absolute thing.
They get upset with you when you tell them it's not.
They do. They do get upset. I mean, look, I want it to be a real thing, but it's not. Like, we've remote viewed the heck out of it. It's just not. I mean, I would love to have more mysteries that are real than running across fake stuff all the time. But then, here's the other thing. We come across stuff and I start talking about this and I sound like I'm bat
crazy,
insane. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah.
It's not something you bring up, at dinner with your family.
Oh, I do. I ruin Thanksgiving like you wouldn't believe. Put a glass of wine in me and like everybody's running from the table by the end of the evening.
I know. I'm kind of the same.
It's Uncle John again.
Crazy Uncle John. Oh yeah. So anyway, back to this SS officer, this Ron guy. He thought the Grail was located in the Cathar stronghold of, excuse me for brutalizing this, but Montségur in France. And he was sent to the region to explore the area's ruins and find occult knowledge, but reportedly turned up nothing. Now, this is what's interesting. He was later found frozen on a mountainside, and it was ruled suicide.
Oh, that's weird.
Okay, so here's the kicker. Did he find something that needed to be covered up, or anger his Nazi bosses over not finding anything?
Wow.
So the bigger story of this is actually in that Relics of Power series that I was telling you about. But what I think is so interesting is calling this suicide. Okay, I can see him going to look for the Grail somewhere, and he's on a mountainside, and he accidentally freezes to death because, like, on his journey. But the fact that they're calling that suicide,
that's a little bit strange. Yeah,
very weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I mean, who commits suicide by climbing to the top of the mountain and freezing to death? I don't know.
No one.
Yeah, no one.
Yeah, it's not suicide. It's dying of natural causes from cold, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Huh. I thought they were handing out cyanide pills like crazy and not.
Yeah, right. Right. So we've got
at least every movie it has them. So.
What's that? Say that again.
At least every movie, like, you watch the movies, like,
they break off the cyanide tooth and chew it.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? That's the cool thing to do. So there's a couple of others that we'll get through really quick before, in the second episode, we talk about the Emerald Tablets. And that is a gigantic subject. So we'll be having an entire episode just on that. But we've got a couple more, which are, one, the Gilgamesh tablets. So this is basically the interesting thing about this tablet is what I can tell you. It was in the British Museum, this tablet, for a while. No one really knew what it meant until, I can't remember his name. A guy came along, taught himself how to read ancient Sumerian. I think that's what this is. And he realized that this story was basically talking about the epic of Gilgamesh.
Are you talking about Anton Parks? Anton Parks.
I'm not sure if
I know he's like a modern, he's French, and he's a modern person who taught himself how to read these tablets. Are you talking about him?
It may be. But
he's
anyway,
got some great info. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was back, whatever I'm talking about was a little bit back in the day, though. It wasn't recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was kind of obsessed with figuring out what this found tablet said, and it was this story of Gilgamesh, and it basically references a massive flood in those tablets. And what's crazy about that, of course, is that this seems to coincide with the idea of this flood that, this biblical flood that happened, back in the day as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to understand, it's like you have a major Earth event happening, and they're going to record it in stone before and after. They're gonna be the guide stones of the time.
Right.
Yeah. But people back then knew how to read them. People now don't know how to read them. So because, I mean, it just gets lost in history. But when you get to these Sumerian tablets, it's just, we've remote viewed a lot of those things and understand a lot of aspects of what things are in those tablets. A lot of things.
Yeah. And I think these Anunnaki or Babylonian tablets, Sumerian tablets, whatever, these are even more interesting, I think, than the Epic of Gilgamesh, because
I think so too.
Yeah, you're talking about star catalogs.
Basically. Right. I mean, we have taken some of these, like, for instance, that little bag. So when you have the Anunnaki type tablets and they're carrying the little bag.
The bag in the statues, they always have a bag, right?
Right. So we remote viewed specifically, because we can take each section and remote view. What does this mean? What does that mean? By the author. What that bag means it carries the seeds of civilization, culture, and people, mankind. So whenever you see that bag, it means that this person, this being, was one that seeded this planet with civilization, culture, and mankind. That's exactly what it means. So
that's interesting, because that actually lines up exactly with what I've got here, which is that this Orion, it's so the star catalogs describe Orion as both a constellation and a being. And it's the chief god of heavenly realms, depicted as a bird head and a human body. So the bird head, the human body, seeding whatever it is here on Earth, the culture, whatever it is, that lines up with that statue we were just looking at in the bag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And these, when we remote view these beings that are in the tablets, we never get anything like them being a concept or a metaphor. We get them as being actual real individuals that are different from humans, that are much bigger, from a different place, another realm, that have to do with the engineering of mankind, humankind. So a lot of the interpretations that people have on these as being just a cultural mythological thing is not what it is. These are describing real events, and you always see this tree of life too, that tree of life that they're showing there. Same thing, because this is the representation, like this being is creating the culture and the DNA for humankind right there. He's got the bag and he's creating it. It's allowing it to grow.
And what's so interesting about that, if you go back to that last image, Lindsay, is like, in one of our previous episodes that just actually just recently published, we were talking about how one of these Wanchu citizens, these Anunnaki guys, they went to visit the Qin Shi Huang emperor, and when he talked to them about the beginning of human beings, it was noted that they reacted in a way as if they saw that happen.
Right.
And they actually remember it.
Right. I remember that. Yeah, that was some fascinating stuff. And that's like, we're talking about the whole Chinese culture. We don't know like ultimately what's in there and how this relates to these types of tablets, but I'm sure there's stuff, because every single culture has some aspect of the same stuff that you find in these tablets. So Chinese are going to have them as well. And there's the Tree of Life. I mean, the tablet of destiny. Is that the tablet of destiny?
This is just an Anunnaki stock photo that I found, but it has the Tree of Life there.
There you go. Well, yeah, it's the same thing, right? They got the bags. They're creating the lineage of humankind. That's what they're doing.
It's a stock tablet of destiny, John.
It is. It's a
That's
stock
what that
tablet
is.
of destiny. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, these are amazing to remote view.
Yeah, and so just to kind of cover this for you guys who are curious, so the Enuma Elish, I guess it's called, is the Babylonian creation story, and that's written on 7 tablets. The creation is on the first 6 tablets, and then the creation and creator are exalted on the 7th. And it involves a conflict between the parents, God Aspu and goddess Tiamat, and their children. So the god Marduk defeats mother Tiamat to become the supreme god, then creates the world and humans. Of course, this is this story. Some believe this is an updated version of an older Sumerian story, and the events and beings changed. So interesting stuff. And I'll just kind of end with a couple of interesting things that I found when researching some of this ancient Sumerian stuff. In New York City, J.P. Morgan has a museum from his old mansion, which contains an enormous collection of Anunnaki scrolls, or sorry, Sumerian, Babylonian. I don't necessarily want to call them Anunnaki, but they're like ancient Sumerian scrolls and figures and art from a very ancient time. And it is fascinating that he has such a large collection and that he was so interested in this. And, you know, some of these scrolls, they actually chisel them into a circular object. Sorry, not cylindrical object.
It's called a cylinder.
And so you turn it and read it, and when you're finished, you could actually read it over again and keep going. And that's how they communicated a lot of this stuff on there. And there's just an enormous collection. And part of me, when I was there, was wondering what in the world. Now this is cylindrical, if you're wondering, you guys at home. So what in the world was J.P. Morgan doing with such a massive collection? Like, what did he know?
Well, it's history. This is the thing. Like these are historical accounts. Like this is the newspaper of the time, you know? Yeah. So if I was wealthy like this man, I would be doing the same. I would be doing the same thing to understand what the history was, because that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. I also think like some of JP Morgan's, I think he knew more than we're aware of, especially after his quote of, you know, millionaires don't believe in astrology, billionaires do.
Yeah.
So he was into something. He knew something, right? It almost doesn't even look like is that even a real face? Like, it looks like that's a prosthetic nose.
It looks like he looks like he was a boxer, actually.
Maybe he was, actually.
Yeah. Looks like he was a boxer. He's got that vibe, and his nose is just smashed up. Or an alcoholic.
Yeah. Although, I don't think he would be as prolific of a businessman if he was always drunk.
Yeah. I don't know. High functioning alcoholics. That was the name of the game back then.
Maybe, yeah. All right. Well, you guys, that is going to be the end of our first episode on tablets. Hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next part, we are going to get into what you've probably all been waiting for, which is the subject and the rabbit hole of the Emerald tablets. What's really going on with the Emerald tablets? Who is this character named Thoth? Hermes Trismegistus. Who are these guys? And is there any truth to these tablets? And the famed emerald that it was chiseled on, which is a whole, we could probably do an episode just on that. That's how weird that is. But stay tuned for that, you guys. And John, thanks so much for being with us. Hope y'all at home thought this was as out of this world as we did.